I have joined the political arena so that the powerful can no longer beat up on people who cannot defend themselves. Nobody knows the system better than me. Which is why I alone can fix it.
That was part of then-candidate Donald Trump's acceptance speech for the Republican presidential nomination in 2016. I Alone Can Fix It is also the title of a new book by Washington Post reporters Carol Leonnig and Philip Rucker. It details the chaotic final 12 months of the Trump presidency and the security failures at the Capitol on January 6th. Carol is also a Pulitzer Prize-winning national investigative reporter. She focuses on the White House and government accountability, and she joins me now from Washington. Welcome, Carol. Thanks very much for being with us.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
So I'm really glad we have you on today because we are just, of course, coming off of that first day of hearings from the House Select Committee. And your book describes a chaotic scene on January 6th with multiple requests from the former Capitol Police Chief for backup from the National Guard. Now, the request was denied by both the House and Senate Sergeants at Arms, Paul Irving and Michael Stenger, who later resigned. We heard from frontline officers on Tuesday, but not the Sergeants at Arms. What can you tell us about their roles?
You know, this is such a critical question and something most Americans really have no idea about. Unlike most police departments, the Capitol Police Department answers to two political officials who were chosen by the Speaker and by the Senate Majority Leader, in this case, Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell. Those sergeants at arms, by the way, are both former retired Secret Service officials, and they basically make decisions for the Capitol Police, budget, funding, and really major security decisions. Those two sergeants at arms resigned in disgrace because they had turned down an emergency request by the police chief to bring in the National Guard on standby days before January 6th, almost like a, preparatory worst-case scenario situation. They just wanted the National Guard standing by. The Capitol Police chief asked for it, but again, he got a no from the sergeants at arms. They didn't like the optics of having uniformed people who look like the military and who are Army folks standing outside the icon of democracy.
It's interesting. You mentioned the background of these former sergeants at arms. In your other recent book, Zero Fail, you detail shortcomings at the Secret Service, the agency, of course, charged with protecting political leaders and their family members. Did you see any of those institutional shortcomings on display in the January 6th response?
Oh, of course. In fact, I was thinking so frequently as I reviewed this for the Washington Post and then later for our book about Donald Trump's final year, a lot of it focusing on January 6th, I thought a lot about how the Capitol Police were essentially in the same situation that the Secret Service were when, this horrible security breach occurred and a man got inside the White House, luckily while President Obama was not at home. The Capitol Police had the similar series of failures. One was a lot of people weren't on duty that day. And also, there wasn't a lot of communication among the Capitol Police officers about the intel threats that their senior officers were learning. There wasn't a lot of information sharing. And so the Capitol Police officers that went to work that day didn't really realize that there was intelligence suggesting people were smuggling guns into Washington and that the Capitol was their target to attack. That chatter never made its way to the people who were basically the battle commanders that day. Another thing that is also similar is that there was a lot of equipment and training that the Capitol Police simply didn't have to prepare them for this moment. Now, let me be clear. I'm not blaming the Capitol Police. I don't think any police force of 2,000, 4,000 could have combated the group coming at them. This was a force of 8,000 to 15,000 protesters trying to storm into the Capitol, and many thousands succeeded in getting inside.
Yeah, as we saw from that video, it really was a combat situation for those officers who are on the front lines. Let's fast forward to late March, because that's when you met with former President Trump at Mar-a-Lago. And here's what he told you about that day. Let's listen to some of that.
But what did you hope they would do when you said, go up there and stop this?
Well, I heard that people wanted to go down to, that wasn't my rally per se. There were a lot of people that spoke.
Yeah.
They had rallies the night before. They had speakers all over the city. You had hundreds of thousands of people. I would venture to say, I think it was the largest crowd I've ever spoken before. It went from that point, which is almost at the White House, to beyond the Washington Monument. It was, and wide. And
but if you could have waited,
and it was a loving crowd too, by the way. There was a lot of love. I've heard that from everybody. Many people have told me that was a loving crowd.
So he later blamed the Capitol Police, claiming they ushered people into the building. After everything that you've learned about that day, Carol, I wonder, what does it suggest to you? What did it suggest to you when you heard the former president call the rioters a, quote, loving crowd?
It told me that the former president, Donald Trump, is either deluding himself or is willing to say anything to continue to foment the fear and the anger that he fomented when he was president. It was a huge political boon to him to have this group of people who already feel dismissed and disregarded and left behind in our nation, who are angry and worried about their place in it. It was really beneficial to him politically to tell them he was their defender, and then to increase and turn up the volume on the level of fear and anger that they had. It's still working for him like a charm, in that it's helping him be the Republican standard bearer today. Republican lawmakers are flocking to Mar-a-Lago to kiss his ring, to get his endorsement, to issue their willingness to support him, because they want his voters. They want to tap into that estimated 30% of America that believes whatever Donald Trump says.
Well, in your book, I Alone Can Fix It, you give readers a sense of the size and scope of law enforcement agencies charged with protecting the Capitol and its immediate surroundings on a quote-unquote normal day. Carol, is there a clear chain of command, and how did things play out on January 6th? You touched on that a moment ago.
There are so many law enforcement agencies in Washington, D.C. that are responsible for so many different pieces of turf, if you will. There's a joke among Secret Service agents. I wrote a book about them called Zero Fail, and there's a joke that they tell each other about how we own this part of the fence, the Park Police owns this part of the sidewalk, and MPD, the Metropolitan Police Department, owns this part of the other side of the street. It's really stunning. Well, Capitol Police has the same situation. They're in charge of that campus, and they literally have to invite other law enforcement agents on campus in order to play any role. That's what Chief Sund was trying to do a couple days before January 6th. Preliminarily invite the National Guard aboard. So many breakdowns happened because on the day of the riot, Chief Sund realized at 1 o'clock, looking from his battle center through the live feeds, that there was a riot. He realized it before anybody else. He could see the police barricades on the outside of the perimeter had been breached. He could see that his officers could not hold anybody at bay for much longer. And he made an emergency call to the head of the D.C. National Guard, General Walker. But what Chief Sund didn't realize was that General Walker didn't have permission to send over his National Guard that day. As a result of a memo that was signed just 2 days earlier, the Secretary of Defense was the only one authorized to send and deploy the National Guard to the Capitol. And unfortunately, because of all the delays that had happened in the previous, days and those hours, it would be another 3 hours before the National Guard would arrive on scene. Luckily for the Capitol Police, they had a wonderful working relationship with the Metropolitan Police Department, which flooded the zone and came to help. And indeed, one of their senior officers took over command of the removal of all the rioters from the property.
Carol, I wonder, as someone who has reported so extensively on the events surrounding January 6th, what are some of the outstanding questions you have that you think should be part of any line of inquiry?
I'm so glad you asked, because there are things that Phil and I, as we reported, were sort of stunned to learn about January 6th. But there were also things we're still upset we don't know. Upset because we're journalists and we want to know everything, right? But here's a key question. What was the knowledge and role of what the White House and Trump's inner circle in the planning of this insurrection, this attack on democracy? Which of Donald Trump's employees and friends and supporters knew this march on the Capitol was being planned in this aggressive way? Because as Chief Sund remarked on that day and told me later, this was not some group whipped up in passion alone by the president's words on the ellipse. This was a group that arrived, a small sort of Delta force, if you will, arrived on the Capitol before the president had finished his speech that day at the ellipse. They were already amassing around the sides of the hill. They had climbing gear, they had batons, they had two-way radios. They had planned this for a long while. So what knowledge did the White House, the president, and the president's inner circle have? Another critical question from my point of view is, who financed this attack? There's been a lot of good reporting about the charges against these individuals and who they say brought them to Washington. There were buses organized. So who paid for that? Because somebody knew that was happening.
Yeah, there are so many critical unanswered questions at this point. The book is I Alone Can Fix It. Carol Leonnig. Carol, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. We really appreciate it.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.